Hello, everybody. I'm here today with Steve, another episode of Deep Dive. And once again, we're here talking about what's dominating the headlines.
Yeah, that's right. And this time it's something that I think many of us have heard about, vaping and Kpods. They have been in the headlines and we're cracking down on it in Singapore real hard.
Yeah. I mean, I remember like just walking at the void deck, and you smell something like a bubble gum, but then except that it's not candy, right? I mean, it's vaping, and that seems like it's becoming a new normal, right, among our youngsters. So because of that, there are now harsher penalties for Kpod users as well as suppliers, along with steeper fines for vape users as part of this broader crackdown.
Yeah. Just a quick overview of the changes and how they will affect our youth. Etomidate and similar drugs found in Kpods are classified as a Class C drug under the Misuse of Drugs Act, which means that young people under the age of 18 caught with Kpods for the first time will be fined $500 and will undergo a rehabilitation program of up to 6 months.
And schools as well, they've been roped in all across Singapore from primary levels to junior colleges. They have been given nicotine test kits. And even institutes of higher learning, they're also enhancing enforcement. And NUS announced something, right?
Yeah, that students caught vaping might face eviction from their hostels. Repeat offenders could face severe disciplinary action. So I think we're talking about very harsh penalties if you're caught with a vape in hand.
So I guess the bigger question is, will all these stricter measures actually help our youths quit vaping? Perhaps to start with you first, Alvin. I mean, you have seen a number of cases, and I'm sure the numbers have gone up over the last few months. Tell us about the youngest vape user that you have encountered or you've heard of.
Right. So we've seen youths up to like 10 years old, 12 and 13 as well. So we've had very concerned parents bringing them in, like my child is vaping, loss of physical control, incontinence even, right? Because it affects the muscle control and all.
Right.
And they're coming very concerned, and the child, well, as usual, they get brought in. They are not willing participants in the process typically, right? But the very concerned parents will bring them in.
Yeah, and we've now gone on to classify Kpods as a Class C drug. I mean, given your experience working with youth who are also sometimes addicted to drugs, what's your take on these measures? Do you think it's the right move, or are we just sort of making this a bit more of a forbidden fruit? So it becomes a bit like, oh, I want it even more, I
think on one end, right, it's good that there are measures to really curb this, because moving around just about 2 years ago, right, vape seems quite a commonplace thing, right? Everyone is doing it. Right. You can smell it as you're walking around in the void decks and stuff like that, right? But is that just vapes? Is that Etomidate? Nobody knows, right? So I think this measures to step out to really ring fence this, to really start to partition this issue is probably a good move at this current juncture, because there's so much we don't know. Right? It was the Wild West just months ago, actually.
So, Cherie, what is the most surprising things, for instance, you have spoken to your kids about the use of, whether it's vape or Kpod? I mean, what have you heard from them? What sort of conversations have you had?
I think they've always known that vapes exist. I mean, we have friends who live overseas that vape. They see it on TV. It's not, as I think you mentioned, it's not a new thing. I think it really became a talking point for them when we had all these kind of like, news articles about Kpods, people walking around like zombies, just kind of the severity of the spectrum, because that's what I kind of see it as, right? You when we say vape and Kpods, it feels like vapes on one end and Kpods on the other end, but they're all kind of the same thing. And so I mean, it was stunning to them. It was really kind of shocking too, even for me. I'm it's like 10 years old. It feels, I thought my 8-year-old was like, it's a long time away. 10-year-old clearly is it's a short hop and skip. So I think they know. The schools have definitely been really full bore about it. They have my elder one who's a student leader. He's been called in for like workshops to help kind of be eyes on the ground. How can we encourage your peers to be more aware? They did a really interesting thing. They kind of got them to meet ex-offenders. This was kind of like a generic drug, but with a kind of like Kpod and vape. And the whole idea was so that they would have a human story. Because a lot of them, I mean, as you're growing up, they may not really encounter. So if you tell a friend, hey, stop. It feels very kind of like preachy, right? So it's really good that they can see, like, this is really, 10 years down, what happens if you make certain choices, kind of like the choice scape, so to speak. So I mean, the big one kind of knows. My middle one, who's 13, he's aware, but I think at some point recently I was talking to him. I said, I heard you had this new talk recently because with the new measures. And he's like, oh my God, yeah, again, it's on the bus, it's in school. Yeah, I know, like, vaping's bad. And he's so done because I think, it feels like you're being nagged and yelled at.
Well, we are being nagged in a way,
true,
but nagging does work to some extent. I mean, we did nag a lot about drugs, and Singapore is pretty much drug-free to a large extent. And I think, I as a parent, I am so grateful for that. So, do you feel that perhaps with vapes now and Kpods, are we doing too much of that?
That's where I'm not sure. So, I mean, at the start, I'm like, yeah, I'm really glad the government's so clear about this, right? And I'm like, yeah, it's great that we know where the line is so that we don't cross it. And I think they made a really strong case with the human stories that came out, and kind of like the science and research that's coming out. And I think also the realization we don't know about how bad vapes can be and how detrimental it is. But it's also a very intense, short period of time, and like it feels like a lot's coming at them. So my concern really is, are we then just shouting at the kids? I mean, I think as adults, as parents, I'm like, yeah, this is great. But I'm also not really I'm their main target audience, right? The youth are there. And I wonder if we have actually asked them, is this really working? Does this piss you off? Does it tire? Does it make you feel frustrated? I don't know.
So like, Alvin, like when you counsel these kids, right? And they come up to you and they say things like, hey, it's just vaping, chill, like how do you respond to something like that? When these kids think, oh, it's not a big deal, they're not going to be addicted to it.
Right, I think one of the most important things we do is we try to understand their perspective, because it's their point of view, it's not our point of view. We have established point of views, right? But for this youth, then they are seeing things very differently from us, right? And these are issues that likely they talk about that among their friends, right? But what are they saying? What are some of these assumptions they have, right? Have they spoken about it with any adults, right? Have they shared these perspectives? Have any adults have any opportunity to speak to them about it, right? In terms of the dangers and consequences that they at their age may not be able to see.
But you see, like Cherie says that, the kid is so fatigued from all that information that they just have a shutdown. So even if an adult speaks to them, they're already like, I already know, what you're trying to say.
From that perspective, you say, it's good. So they're not interested in vapes anymore, isn't it? Right? So after a while then, it's not that novel anymore. It's not that special anymore. Hopefully that's the case, right? So don't need another crisis. Don't need another cigarette, right? So years back, it was the cool thing. Cool. Well, it's the cool thing to do. Yeah, not the right word.
I mean, movies used to always have someone smoking because it was deemed cool.
And to be fair, they make it look pretty good on screen, but it was really terrible.
And guess what looks good now? Vapes, right? They are the thing now.
Right, I know the flavors are quite fancy. They have like Tie Guan Yin, they have some lychee blast,
just joking about
blueberry.
Right?
Oh, you know it.
I did my research.
It also comes in like really cute stuff. Like anything, as you were saying, anything could be a
vape. If there one in pipakau flavor, I'd had it.
Wow.
Tried it.
Wow.
Tried it.
Well, does it actually help your throat?
It's just a joke, but if it's novel enough, right? You pick interest, then my attention goes there. Then the valence to try that increases.
But that's the danger too, that it becomes this like fun thing to do and you forget about the consequences without realizing that actually a vape still has some pretty bad stuff in it, And of course, this is where the differentiation, vapes and Kpods, is because the Kpods started having this drug, which is harmful to people, but some are arguing that vapes in itself don't seem that bad. So are we being too harsh on it? And cigarettes are still allowed, so...
I think my worry is we see them in a continuum, right? Vapes and Kpods, and we kind of say them in a single breath. And Kpods, I think it's very clear. Even the young people, they're like, drugs are really bad. I mean, it really seems quite frightening anyway. But then in contrast, vapes then feel... not so bad lah, know. Maybe at least I'm not Kpod, I'm not doing Kpod, I'm just vaping. Do you worry? I mean, how do I as a parent then kind of navigate that? Or when we have conversations with the youth in my work, how do we have that conversation where it's not a case of like, it's not so bad, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you compare, how do we guard against that?
And also it's legalized in a lot of countries, but obviously at the age of 18 and above, you see. So then there is that confusion there, right? How bad can it be?
And that's the point, right? So to understand from their point of view how they see it, right? And trying to bridge the gap in understanding, like, you say that, but then again, right, who knows what it is that you're vaping, right? It's just smoke.
Yeah.
Right? From a distance, right? How do I know if it's Kpods? Right? Or this is just a plain vape, right? And even if it's Kpods, who knows if it's a tomidate, whether it's ketamine, whether it's another substance, right? The uncertainties out there are just too much. And if you say vapes, right? Who's producing them, right? Which country, which company is producing them? What are the regulations? Do they wear gloves or not when they produce them. Who knows?
Because basically right now, when you buy a vape and you smoke it, you have no idea what you're really smoking
Yeah,
actually.
yeah,
Right?
exactly. And also not to mention that you know, a lot of these kids even in schools, like we've heard a friend saying that, you know, primary school kids are selling to their classmates, and is that something that you see, I mean, often enough when you counsel the students?
So far on our end, not so much dealing. We do have kids who have used it before, but we do hear about that, and we are very concerned. So one of the things that was communicated to us as counselors, so we at our center we have like a drop-in center. We have beneficiaries coming in to spend time there, right? So it's talking about how is this gonna go? So they tell us like, oh, what's gonna happen is once the law comes up, right? The sellers, the distributors will have a lot of stock on hand they have to clear because now it's dangerous, right? Now it could be more consequences. So they want to let go of stock. And you want to let go of stock, you need people to sell, right? Who are they going to go to? Right? So chances are, like just like how loan sharks will ask teenagers to be runners, right? Because like there's lesser consequence. It won't be so bad. At most, you get a warning, first time only. So then that's going to happen. Right? And teens with a desire to do something cool, do something that is impactful, right? Like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm selling this stuff, right? They're going to begin to want to sell more. Or if the commission is higher, they'll want to do more of it.
But at the same time, that's just a transitional kind of thing, because eventually vapes will not be in our country, or far fewer. Right? So the overall is just this transition period where you might see this happening.
Correct. And it's not just teens are selling. Who are they selling to? Because once again, right, if we know that in the developmental stages, right, the frontal cortex is not very developed. That means decision making is not the best. So we have had already reports of teens trying to sell this to younger kids.
Oh.
Yeah, that's happening there. How many of those have we not noticed or caught?
Yeah.
Because the fact is, we don't even know what it looks like these days.
Exactly.
I find that quite terrifying, actually.
So, Cherie, for you have your method is just to keep your boys very busy.
I mean, I don't keep them busy. They
Like
keep
sports and all
themselves
that.
busy. I think I'm grateful that we have always kind of have an open conversation. We've had conversations about really hard things in the work I do with the Birthday Collective. The whole thing was about having hard conversations and how do we enable that. So we've talked about it. But also too, I feel like it's not a conversation that you can shift the behavior in one go. It's got to be something that you kind of have to build up with them. So I mean, when it comes to like health and how they treat their bodies, it's something that we've talked about from the time they decided to start, competitive sports. They feel when they are not well rested, they feel the difference. When they are not well nourished, they feel the difference. When they just recovered, they feel the difference. So now they take, at least my elder two, they're able to take ownership of their own health. I no longer nag about supplements. I no longer nag about like what they do for recovery. They sort it out because they know it makes a difference. My big one runs. So it's very clear in his timing, right? When he's on form and when he's not on form, when he's what you qualify for. So I think they have created in their life a way that kind of makes it less, they make themselves less willing to go down to put stuff in their body that's not good for them. But it's also a long-term thing.
Also because their activity is a physical activity.
Yes.
So you can actually feel the difference, and
correct.
you will see the difference, But many other youth today we know are not.
Exactly. So I was asking him just now, I said, how then do you have that conversation with someone who is quite sedentary? It's not a big deal. It won't affect my life. Like, how do parents start having better conversations? I mean, even if they cannot change it now, I mean, they have to start somewhere. If day zero is today, what would be like 2 things that they can talk to their kids about?
Right, very simple things. That also hinges upon whether you have a talking relationship to begin with. Right?
Yeah.
If you don't have that,
fair
begin that. Right? Begin
I
that
can
somewhere.
WhatsApp them.
Yeah, call Alvin.
Right?
Send them
Literally.
TikToks.
Yeah, literally that's how it is. Sometimes through social media first,
Right.
Oh,
then
cool.
in person, talk about food, right? Eventually then just how are you feeling today? Since you haven't used it in a while, haven't used any vapes in a while, right? How are you doing? Then now you have started to notice how they are doing physically, just like in case of his sons, right? How you notice how they're doing physically. You notice the changes when they engage in a certain use of certain kind of substances or certain kind of devices, right? And even if it's social media, and giving that feedback, right? Because they are feeling it, right? And you are also noticing and you're telling them, right? That kind of communication then brings to awareness of what is happening.
How do you also balance privacy and safety, right? Like you want to check their phones, you want to check their bags, but at the same time, you don't want to sort of bridge that trust. So how do you navigate that as a parent?
So that's a whole thing on its own as well, right? So to nurture that to begin with, to make it a norm. So just like maybe I could be wrong here, but I think most families, not as many families have dinners together nowadays than compared to before. Can we begin to nurture that?
Yeah.
Right, and then during dinner at the dinner table for that half an hour to 45 minutes, what do we talk about? Right, how do we nurture these conversations? Right, I think that is also key. And then to begin to have conversations about this subject, all right, to have that inroad to showing this kind of concern.
So essentially, you need to have that relationship,
Yeah.
which is based on a pretty good foundation. Because then anything, you can talk about anything or any issue that arises, any concerns.
It doesn't
you can
feel
be-
like I'm interrogating
Yeah,
at
exactly.
that point. Yeah.
Exactly.
When we engage in counseling, right, so it's also a lot of, it involves quite a little bit of parental involvement as well. That's something we make note of, because I can speak to the child, but if
it's whole
they're not willing to
environment.
listen,
Yeah,
right,
fair
then
enough.
there needs to
So-
be more work.
The thing is, now parents are going to be worried for those who know their kids are vaping and they're like, it's against the law, and they're like, let me send you for rehab, let me send you to quit vape, I mean, how do they navigate this without, because the moment they do that, the kid's probably going to say,
Yeah.
what have you
You've
done,
s- yeah, you've
that's it,
betrayed
I'm not
our
talking
trust.
to you anymore, exactly, right?
Yeah. So sometimes that's a thing that may happen in severe cases where there's risk to harm of self and others, right? So if I notice that, my child is really experiencing a lot of symptoms, this is very worrying, I'm actually afraid for their safety, then there's no negotiation. You have to do this.
Okay.
There's no other choice. But in any other circumstances, typically we'll say, like, if you're not sure, come down and have a chat with us first without your child in town.
Right.
Let's have a conversation. Let's see how to do this gently.
And I suppose kids who want to hide, right, vaping, it's quite easy. I mean, unless you see smoke, right, blowing out of the toilet cubicle. But what are some of the signs that parents can sort of look out for before they even get to that stage where they are, from vape to Kpod? Because then that's an actual drug.
Yeah. And actually now you can't even tell the difference between
So
the
that's
vape
the
and
scary
Kpod.
thing. And it's 1 in 3. I think during the rates, they found the vapes, right? 1 in 3 was actually laced with etomidate or ketamine.
Quite straightforward. So any changes in behavior, be curious. So that's the thing, right? So one of the first things we really encourage parents to do is to be curious, to be a little bit more aware of their whereabouts, of what they're going through, right? Any changes in mood, changes in behavior, changes in routine as well. Because if you're vaping, if you're using Kpods, right, that affects your energy levels, right? That affects your sleep. Then you'll see pattern changes in these areas in terms of their routine. Yeah, so that's the first thing we will say to look out for first and foremost. And then the louder symptoms will be, being unconscious. Suddenly I walk in on my son lump on the sofa in a very weird position. Then
Right.
that's a very
Yeah.
given
That's a
telltale
warning
sign.
sign.
Yeah, that's straightforward.
Warning
that's
bells,
easy.
actually.
Yeah. So the more subtle signs would be just changes in behavior, changes in energy level, right? But then to begin with, we ought to be a little bit more concerned with these changes to begin with.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to the fact that you have to be able to notice those changes, which
Exactly.
means having that relationship to begin with
Yeah.
your kids. I mean, Cherie, do you find that that's increasingly difficult in this day and age? Where we're on our devices so much. I mean,
One of the things we institute, and my family gives me a lot of grief for this, is that we don't have a TV in the living room.
okay.
TV becomes a very intentional thing that we do, and phones are also not allowed. But that's also hard for us, right? Because I mean, it's easy for me to be on my phone or like clear work at the dinner.
You have to set the example.
Yeah, and I will admit, it's really hard. It's really
But
really
they
hard.
can watch movies and shows.
I mean, they
just
do.
not
It's
on the...
they can. It's just not at dinner table and our living room, which is where near the dining
okay.
table. There is no access to
There's
to
so
a
many
screen.
great shows like Talking Point.
So we do. So they're allowed to watch it, just not over dinner.
Okay.
It's something that we set up to do. You know what I
Sure,
mean?
sure.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of one thing. I think the second thing for me is we opted after COVID. My husband and I have the luxury of kind of working a large part of our work from home. So that's really been helpful. We see them in the morning. We see them, when they come back from school. We try and be there at their events and so forth. But I do recognize that, I mean, it's a privilege and it's not the norm.
Yeah, because most parents, like, dad and mom have to work, right? So then that's when the school really needs to come in. The peers really need to come in and if they have any fishy behavior or dodgy behavior to sort
Which
of
is
raise the alarm.
One of the big questions in terms of who should play or take a bigger responsibility in things like that. Because the kids are at school for many hours a day, but at the same time, these are your own children.
Yeah.
So do we should we be expecting the school to be able to teach them that vaping is bad, or is it the parents' responsibility to then be the one?
I would say the parents must be in the know. I think that's always fair, right? But I do feel, and this is really my vantage point, I think my kids have better in with their friends and vice versa than from me sometimes. If their friend says it's like, oh, it's cool not to vape, definitely, right?
Sure.
It's better. So it's really important to kind of also see where their social context is, who they're mixing with. So I definitely am one that believes that we need to harness the voice of the youth. I think they're really talked at, and we're very good at talking at them. COVID was understandable because everyone was talking at us anyway because no one really knew. But here, vapes had already existed. It's not something new. Kpods maybe. And then the conversation, the fury of the conversation is new. The intensity is new, and it's really in their faces. And I think we need to kind of give them space to, one, internalize, kind of unpack it, two, kind of find their own stance in things that you can feel like it's not so bad, but still not want to do it.
Right.
And that's an ideal outcome. And then be able to say to your friend, hey, don't do it lah. It's not cool. There are better things to do in your life. And I think that is the missing link that I'm not seeing yet.
Okay.
I see it. I guess some parts in my son's school where they are engaging their student leaders. I guess they're an easy group because they walk around the school.
If I play devil's advocate for a bit, it's because we don't have time. From the government's point of view, is talking with you, discussing will take time, and things will get worse very quickly. They could escalate. So with this situation of Kpods, we want to get it out of the country
ASAP.
as soon as possible.
But I think you can scare, but you still have to care. I mean, you can start with a very clear boundary. It's just like COVID, right? But then everyone, for me, was during the circuit breaker when we kind of have real conversations about, okay, this is scary. Mommy's scared too. What does this mean? At that time, we didn't even know what was going to end.
So do you also show videos? We've seen these videos of these zombie kids. Is that something you actually show your kids? And
No,
say,
my kids showed me because they were faster. They were faster with it than I was.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think they know. They're definitely in the know. But I think they are still trying to figure out the role they play. Currently, they're all just recipients and they're part of the problem. How can we make them part of the solution too? I think we've seen it overseas in Hong Kong. They do that with a couple of youth programs. We see a lot of Singapore youth do that too. In the States with tobacco companies, right? They started a whole student movement where the youth are the ones saying, hey, don't trust them. So I think you can harness them. We have time, I think, after the initial spike to kind of worry about these things and still have people have these conversations. I'm not sure if just dumping on the teachers and the schools and like, it's your problem because you see them, most part, it's gonna solve it. It's gotta be really an omni-channel social thing. Because what I wanted to ask is, what happens if the parents are vaping and then the kids like, my mother vapes anyway. Then how? So, you get that, right? And then in school, they're like, but my mommy vapes, okay. I mean, I've heard of
Report
kids,
her.
I've heard of kids who don't feel it's a big deal because they've seen it. They have normalized it in the homes.
Yeah.
So really having conversations about, that's why we always do try as much as possible to engage parents as well in the conversation, in therapy and in counselling, right? Because we need to understand how is this viewed at home? Right? If parents are also vaping and this is seen as okay, but we're just following rules because the school counsellor sent him over here. He wants us to bring him here, so we bring him here, but we're okay with it. Then that presents a problem. Then we may have to do some psychoeducation. We may then have to work with the ambivalence, so to speak. Right?
Well, what is one policy change you would like to see that you think will make the biggest difference?
Policy change, I'm not sure. That's a strong word, but I would say I would hope to hear more from the youth themselves.
Okay.
Right? Because we're hearing a lot from professionals, right? We hear talking, parents are speaking, right? But what about the youth? How do they feel about it? How do they see it? What is the role of vapes in society, in their society right now, right? Right. So we've had our own eras. Now this is theirs.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe we should do another podcast and get the youth to come in and to share their point of view without any adults around, so to speak.
Very fresh.
Because it's true. I think if you can own the problem, if you recognize the issue, you own it yourself as a young person, then you will actually, hopefully make the right choices, and you won't need to be nagged, so to speak.
But also, we need to not just be a nagging state. It cannot just be any problem. Oh, it's okay, government will have a rule for us. We need to raise a generation of kids that can think for themselves as well. And that takes training, that takes time, that takes a latitude of error as well, and how do we then hold space for that conversation? That's something I think about a lot actually. Ever since this came up, it's like they're frustrated and then they're just gonna not want to talk about it. But it's important. How do we do that?
That's a whole documentary, I think. Because I think for so long, Singapore, we're so used to the government often stepping in to alleviate a lot of the issues and challenges, so that I argue too that sometimes we don't have to think for ourselves because you've thought about it before I even thought about it as a citizen, which is good and bad.
Are you also heartened by the fact that, that this is being clamped down early? So because if, you clamp down vaping early, then escalating to the drugs, right? The hard drugs like ketamine and etomidate. Unless you're like a hardcore drug addict, a lot of the kids right now, it seems like it's all experimental, and it seems like we are, stubbing the problem from start. So I mean, are you heartened by that? Somewhat hopeful?
As a parent, I'm relieved. On one level, but as a facilitator, I wonder if it's too much, too fast, too intense. Not that we can change it. So now the question is, what role do I play in my family and my greater community? How can we create spaces where we can kind of like take a step back? Now that we have rules, now that we know these are the OB markers, let's talk about it in a way that engages them. But also I would like them to lead the conversation. And I'm interested to see, because I feel like we give them too little credit sometimes. So there are pockets of youth who I think have really good high agency and they feel it too. And I would like to hear from them, actually.
Alvin, any last words perhaps for some of the parents who are listening in who are in a situation where they know their kids are vaping, but they're not quite sure how to handle it?
I think as with any kind of parenting situation, be curious, right? Just be a bit more watchful. Sometimes it's not about talking, it's not about having the conversation. Sometimes that's not something that every family is ready to do. But just noticing what is being said, where they go to, noticing the laundry, right? Went to gym, but no gym clothes.
And also pocket money, right? I mean, like,
where's the money
where's
going?
The money going?
Right.
Yeah.
Is it more money than usual? How come you got so much money? Right. How come like a bit more secretive, locking the door now? Being very, very curious. And sometimes it's not just not Kpods or anything, but it's something worthwhile to ask questions about, to be curious about, to investigate a little bit further.
And when they notice those things, what should they do?
Right. Next step, once you notice those things, now you have information to act on. Right. I now know which direction to go on to ask questions. Do I have to just check in the school leaders? All right. Do I have to check in with friends? All right. Maybe this is something that the youngsters are doing that I just don't know. So it's actually nothing out of the norm. Right. At least it leads you down a path of better questioning.
Okay.
So I guess at the end of the day, laws and rehab, they can only go so far. A lot of conversations that take place in the living room, in the classroom, actually that's as important, or if not more.
Because if you want to break the law, if there's a will, there's a way, right? You'll always find a way to get around it. Okay, well, thank you for coming in and sharing those insights with us. Of course, for all of you, our listeners and viewers, we do love to hear thoughts on this issue. It's one that is concerning many of our young people, especially today. And that's why, it's very much in the news. But, there is no resolution. I think at the end of the day, it's up to each individual and each family to sort of find the best way to deal with this. Let's give a shout out to the team. We've got Tiffany Ang, Junani Johari, Joanne Chan, Saya Win, Ho Pei Ning, Nathaniel Fetovero, and Alison Jenner. Video is by Hanida Amin. That's it. We'll see you guys next week.
See you then.
Bye.